Good morning and welcome to the Wilson Center. My name is Benjamin Gadan. I am the director of our Latin America program. I'm so thrilled so many of you could join us in person and online for today's conversation. Despite the winter weather, I'm not surprised at all by all of the interest this event has generated. After all, the Panama Canal is one of the world's greatest engineering feats. More than a century after the United States finished digging this 51-mile waterway in 1914 and built locks to raise and lower ships 85 feet, the canal remains a vital artery for global shipping. Last year alone, ships used the canal to travel between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans almost 10,000 times. 5% of all seaborne trade passes through the Panama Canal. Then again, I suspect there might be another reason why many of you are interested in the Panama Canal. In his inaugural address last month, the new U.S. president expressed regret for the transfer of the canal to Panama a quarter century ago, a handover President Jimmy Carter and the U.S. Senate approved in the late 1970s. Describing the U.S. canal turnover as a foolish gift, the president complained about the Panama Canal tolls and expressed alarm that a Chinese company is operating ports in Balboa and Cristobal on either side of the canal, nodding to long-standing concerns that China might be spying on U.S. commercial and naval vessels, and that it could disable the canal in wartime. The United States, he said, should once again control the canal. Those criticisms came as a surprise to many. The Panama Canal Authority, with 9,000 employees who operate the world's most famous shortcut, is widely regarded as among the best-run state-owned enterprises in the world. Under Panamanian control, the speed of transit has gone up and the rate of accidents has gone down. In 2016, Panama completed a gargantuan project that doubled the canal's capacity, a $5 billion undertaking that allowed mammoth container ships and liquefied natural gas tankers to use the canal and therefore skip the long and costly trip around the tip of South America. Even so, the president's remarks and a visit to the Miraflores locks earlier this month by the new U.S. Secretary of State spotlighted legitimate concerns about the canal's future. The canal, for example, loses 50 million gallons of fresh water each time a ship passes through, and climate change has reduced the rainfall that it relies on. Last year, to preserve water, the canal was forced to reduce the size and number of ships permitted to cross. The best solution, a new reservoir, would require $1.6 billion and 6 years to construct. Panama, of course, has no interest in seeing disruptions to the canal, whether from drought or sabotage. It is the lifeblood of the Panamanian economy, generating directly $5 billion a year in profits. It is a source of pride and a symbol of Panamanian nationhood. To discuss how Panama is addressing concerns about the Panama Canal, I'm so thrilled to welcome two of the very best experts on the subject. Our moderator is John Feely, a friend and career Foreign Service officer who served as the U.S. ambassador to Panama from 2015 to 2018 and still travels regularly to the country. He also serves as a member of our advisory board here at the Wilson Center. Our special guest is Alberto Aleman, who served as the first Panamanian Panama Canal administrator from 1999, when the canal was transferred to Panamanian control, to 2012. He's also a member of Panama's Presidential International Affairs Advisory Committee. They will discuss the future of this global trade hub amidst complex operational and geostrategic hurdles. I'm so happy to see so many friends here today in person at the Wilson Center, including Panama's ambassador to the United States, Jose Miguel Aleman. Welcome. Ana Irene Delgado from Panama's mission to the Organization of American States, Francisco Guerrero from the Organization of American States, and other dignitaries. Thank you so much for joining us. The Wilson Center brought a delegation to the Panama Canal in 2023 to meet with the Deputy Canal Administrator and other senior leaders of the Panama Canal Authority and the Panamanian government. We will continue to follow these issues closely, both U.S.-Panamanian relations and the state of the Panama Canal. For now, please join me in thanking Ambassador Feely and Administrator Aleman for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's a real pleasure to be here. Again, thanks to all of you. here in the room who braved Washington's wonderful weather. I actually came up just for this, and I'm ready to go back down south of the border. It is an enormous pleasure for me to have this gentleman to my left. You all can read his bio online. I think suffice it to say, for those of you who aren't already somewhat familiar with the Panama Canal, he is known in Panama as Mr. Canal. Literally, there is nothing that has happened in the history of the modern Panama Canal that Ingeniero Alberto Aleman has not been involved with. Alberto, thank you for braving the weather and coming up. You were literally there at the creation. There at the creation in 1999, serving as the last director of the U.S.-run Panama Canal Commission when Panama assumed sovereign control of the canal and operations on December 31st, 1999. Very small footnote for Joe Reeder sitting in the front row, who was also there. I was there, tucked away in a little corner where staffers go, holding briefcases for Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and my boss at the time, Pete Romero, a dear friend who I know is watching today. Can you just give us a little sort of sense of what it was like on that day when the handover happened 22 years after Jimmy Carter and Omar Torrijos signed the treaties?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here, even with the weather. I was, as you well pointed out, I was the last U.S. administrator of the Panama Canal for the Panama Canal Commission. I was appointed by President Clinton and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And also, I was then appointed in 1998 as the first administrator for the Panama Canal Authority. That's the new entity that actually would run the canal after the transfer. I think that the transfer of the Panama Canal from the U.S. to Panama is a success story of both countries. It's really a very unique process in which the two countries, through a lot of our own history, came about to do that transfer in an order manner. So we had, and Joe was the chairman of the board at the time when I got in. We have one mission in everyone, all the board of directors, to make sure that we have a seamless transfer of the Panama Canal from the U.S. to Panama. There was a lot of concerns. There were concerns in Panama. Our own nationals were concerned if we were going to make that another local institution. There were concerns from all the companies that will use the canal, the shipping companies. What will Panama will do? If Panama will run that as the U.S. was running it, that will do the maintenance, that will continue to do a good job of running the Panama Canal. So we need to deal with that. There was also a lot of concerns from the young people who work in the canal. There were concerns because they were not be passing to be a U.S. federal employee, because that's what we were, into an employee of the Republic of Panama, just like any. So we have to deal with all of those concerns. I have to say that I have a lot of support from the U.S. side to adjust all the regulations that we required in order to make that transfer to be a successful one. We also need to change the mentality of the organization, change the culture. Because under the U.S., the canal was run as a break-even operation, and we wanted the canal to be run for a profit and to be run like a corporation. We went to visit all the major corporations that runs natural resources, like Codelco, Pemex, PDVSA at the time.
All the parastatals throughout Latin America.
Throughout Latin America, to learn how they were doing that, what was the governance that they had. But also the ones that we actually had a lot in common and we used a lot was the Tennessee Valley Authority.
The Tennessee Valley Authority. Really?
Yeah, the TVA, because the Tennessee Valley Authority, they actually manage a lot of water resources, and that was very much, what we were also going to need to do.
Let me ask you something here. Can you explain to us a little bit more the idea of the church and state. You mentioned that canal employees, right, tugboat captains, stevedores, the practicos, the pilots that take the ships through, they were actually U.S. federal government employees with full U.S. federal government benefits. But what I noticed when I was in Panama is that the ACP, the Panama Canal Authority, is not part of the Panama government of the day, right? A president gets elected every 5 years, there's a new administration. But the Panama Canal Authority is more like the Codelco or the Pemex. It's a part, it's of the Panamanian people. But help us understand a little bit this sort of church and wall state. Has it worked?
Yeah, actually, the one of the things that Panama did was we changed the constitution. We add to our constitution an amendment to the constitution that expressly say how Panama will operate the Panama Canal, and that took, actually a lot of effort and the way it was done was through two politically different governments, President Endara, and then after that, President Valladares. So in 1994, we amend our constitution, and that sets the rules in which the canal first is going to be the way it's going to be run, it's going to be managed. It gives the rights to actually the watershed, control the watershed, different way of contracting, our own way of buying, what we need. Mm-hmm. So
independent
it's very
from the
independent
government.
from the government. Actually, the philosophy behind that is that the canal, it's 100% notorious Panamanian. It's an entity, it's full Panamanian, but it's out of party politics.
Right,
Okay?
right. So the governance structure of the ACP, the Panama Canal Authority, is you have a canal administrator, the position that you held, a deputy administrator, then there's a corporate C-suite, for lack of a better word, director of operations, director of engineering, the schedulers, things like that. And then there's a board of directors. Talk to us a little bit about the board of directors. Who are they? How do they get on that board?
Yeah, the board of directors is composed of 11 people. They are appointed every 3 years. We change 3. Actually, the president has just appointed 3 that have to go to our Congress to be ratified. And they serve for 9 years. So they are staggered, 9 of them. There's one that is appointed by the president, that he serves as the chairman of the board. But the only...
And that's the canal minister,
That's the
if I'm not
canal,
mistaken.
it's called the canal minister, yes.
Yeah.
But it's, he doesn't do anything, only basically he runs or directs the board of directors. He's the chair. He chairs the board of directors.
Okay. He doesn't have like a 51% vote or a
No,
veto.
no.
He can't take the president's wishes and translate them into canal policy.
No, all of that is done by the board of directors, and there's one that is by the Congress that also appoints one. Mm-hmm. Okay? So those are the 11, and it actually has worked very well throughout the years because first you serve a long term, so it doesn't. Our terms in Panama are 5 years. So if a president appoints you, maybe he will be there for 4 years by the president, and then he will stay 5 more years, other different governments. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that brings that diversity, and I think that at least through the times I served, the board of directors actually acted as a very good governance of the Panama Canal. Okay, they protect the Panama Canal against all of these party politics or movements against, trying to bring the canal into politics. That doesn't mean that the canal is, is an institution that, being from Panama, you have to be, you might be away from party politics, but you're part of Panama and the Panamanian decisions.
Right.
On terms of, how we continue to promote what I think that was the most important part that happened in December 31st of 1999. Besides getting the canal, because the canal actually is an infrastructure. As an engineer, I see it as an infrastructure. That's what it is. But more important for us in Panama, what really happened on that December 31st at noon was that we, for the first time, Panama was fully 100% owner of our geographical position. Okay? Because that's the most valuable asset that we have.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And that's really what happened, and therefore we have to, to make, the best that we can get out of Panama by having, developed that, even better.
Right, right. This issue, and I have to say this, I felt this when I would visit the canal. I must have been there 20 times with visiting congressional delegations and other people. There's a fierce sense of loyalty of canal workers to the Panama Canal. And if there is one thing that I noticed that unites all Panamanians, and you, like every other country, are fractious people, there's polarized politics, there's a lot of fighting. But if there's one thing, I always used to joke, it's like La Virgen de Guadalupe de Mexico. If there's a Panamanian Virgen de Guadalupe, she's called the Panama Canal. And that idea that you protect it as sacrosanct above party politics is something that comes through. Let me take you back, though, a little bit earlier to 1977, and very simply ask you, why are there two Panama Canal treaties? What is this purpose that each serves? Were they negotiated at the same time? And if you could explain what the DeConcini Amendment is.
Well, I think that there are two treaties, the Panama Canal Treaty and the Neutrality Treaty. They were both negotiated at the same time. One ceased to expired in December 31st at noon.
Right.
And the Neutrality Treaty is still, it's valid. Actually, the treaty is also has been signed or adhered to by some 40 other nations, and it sits in the
Sits in the OAS right
OAS,
now as the
exactly.
repository of an international treaty.
That basically what the Neutrality Treaty says is that the canal should be neutral, for the transit of every ship, in the world, and we should protect that. The DeConcini Amendment, basically, it says that the Panama Canal and the U.S. has the responsibility to assure that the Panama Canal will remain open and secure to the ships of all the nations, okay, and also that both countries will actually defend, okay, the canal against any threat, of the regime of neutrality. More or less, that's what
Okay.
that says, and it's important that the Panama and the canal. We understand very well that that treaty is and is about the neutrality and the operation of the Panama Canal.
Okay, but let's talk now about, so that's what the international treaty says. Let's talk about the practicalities of how that is actually implemented. And for 25 years, I think it's fair to say, until very recently, we haven't heard any issues about the neutrality of the canal being violated. So what role does the government of Panama play? What role does the Panama Canal Authority play? And what role does the United States government play in practically ensuring that the neutrality of the canal is not violated?
Well, first, usually there has to be a threat, okay, against the neutrality of the canal, the operation of the canal. There are some concerns now that have been vocal about it. Some things have changed in time. But in no way, shape, or form, Panama has not done what it should have done with the treaty. We have abided by the treaty fully.
Okay.
The Panama Canal Administration, or the Panama Canal Authority, takes care of the canal, operates the canal. In fact, every vessel that are in canal waters is under the control of a Panama Canal pilot.
Yeah, it's the only place in the world, right?
Yeah, that it takes full control of the ship. Even those ships that goes to ports that are near the canal shores. Okay, the canal has a lot of control over all of those movements. You cannot go to port unless the canal allows you to go to port. You cannot get out of port unless the canal allows you to get out of port, and it has to be with a pilot on board.
And all of those pilots are Panamanian.
All of them, most of them are Panamanian. There are still some actually dual
Actually,
national.
that's right. We have Americans that are still
Yeah,
there.
they're still there, which is
Is
fine.
there? Let me just ask. We recently took the car keys away from my dad. Is there a mandatory age retirement for these guys? I can.
They make good money, so sometimes they want to stay. Yes, they are very good pilots, and that's one of the reasons that it's so important that they are very well trained.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I can also add that in terms of the practical defense of the canal, there is an annual exercise that the United States Southern Command, which used to be based in the Canal Zone and left in 1999, moved to Miami, but it's called the Panamax exercise. And I'm looking at a couple of former colleagues here from the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs who will go unnamed. But you look marvelous out there, Craig Kelly and Jeff DeLaurentis. But we used to do this exercise where we would game out what happens if, and quite frankly, in my, gray-haired remembrances, it was a Russian ship. What if a Russian ship tried to come through and do something hostile in the canal, violate the treaty? And so every year there is literally a gaming exercise done by the military, and it involves at least 10 to 12 U.S. government agencies. Mm-hmm. And you may recall, Ingeniero, in 2013, there was a North Korean vessel called the Changchanggang that was coming out of Havana with Soviet-era MiG parts in a false hull going to Pyongyang. American intelligence picked that up. We worked with the Panamanian authorities, and that ship and the illegal cargo were seized. And I've always thought that kind of indicated the sort of cheek-by-jowl, hand-in-hand cooperation between the United States government, the Panama Canal Authority, and the Panama government du jour. That was during the Martinelli administration. And so I, too, found it a little bit strange that for 25 years, that neutrality treaty had, by multiple U.S. administrations, assessed to have not been violated, and now there are allegations that it has been violated. Let me ask you about, I want to shift subjects here, the expansion of the canal. So are you still in the seat as administrator when this starts?
Actually, we put it together.
You did?
Yeah.
All right. Is that the royal we, or is that just you put it together? No, I'm
No.
kidding.
Actually, it was a very fantastic project.
Mm-hmm.
When I
And this is just 8 years after the transfer, right?
Well, that's when we started building it. We started looking at that because when I got involved in the canal, when they asked me, actually Joe was part of the board of directors of the Panama Canal Authority, Panama Commission, sorry, and the commission has approved that there was a study to be made in how the canal was going to be turned over to Panama. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that study was going to be made by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, that assessment, and
which was paid about $1.3 million by Panama.
Yeah.
So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers paid $1.3 million to do the feasibility study.
Yeah.
To do an audit of the 85-year-old infrastructure.
To do an audit of the 85-year-old infrastructure.
We spent about $1 billion after that, checking off all the boxes that the Corps said need updated.
$1 billion
Yeah.
spent. So the U.S. government spent $1 billion.
No.
Panama paid the U.S. government.
No.
Out of the revenues that Panama got, it paid for the.
Got it.
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
The audit came out, and basically defined all the work that needed to be done to put the canal up to par and to modernize it further, and that was part of the study. And I had a group of Panamanian engineers we were the inspectors, okay, of the Army Corps in the delivery of this program.
Now,
Then,
Roberto
yeah.
did not know what hockey was.
Exactly.
Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, with the Army Corps of Engineers, and now he
Yeah.
supports the damn Penguins.
The Penguins, exactly. Because
Okay,
it was-
I don't know
it
if our
was-
online audience, Joe, heard that comment, but I will summarize it by saying they have a pretty strong hockey rivalry. And it
Exactly.
has very little to do with the Panama Canal. But it is a really interesting point that you raise, this idea that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was intimately involved
Yeah.
with your initiative, Panama's initiative, to expand the canal.
No, they show me in Pittsburgh actually, and it was because we have this weather. I always say the Penguins are playing, then I'll go visit with you guys over there. And it was.
I want to make it clear that the Wilson Center neither endorses the Pittsburgh Penguins. Didn't see this one coming.
Okay, but they show me the 1938 third set of locks project, because the United States started building the third set of locks back in 1939, and they stopped because of the war. Okay, so that effort was stopped. So being in that office, they showed me that, and the problem that we were facing was that the Panama Canal was getting close to capacity. We started analyzing the capacity of the Panama Canal, because the original canal has a capacity of around 320 million canal tons, that we can move. So I put together a team of experts to analyze what will be the maximum capacity and what we can do in the infrastructure to make that happen. If we can do tied-up stations so we can move the ships faster. Mm-hmm. That also, we start thinking, okay, what are we going to do next? Because of the treaty, there was also a study made between Japan, the U.S., and Panama. What will be the solution to expand the canal, in the future? They were talking about a sea level canal, but the end of the conclusion of that effort was a third set of locks. Mm-hmm. So we start putting together, about the year 2000, a team of people to start analyzing how we can expand the canal further. Okay, and that, at the end of the day, we came with the program. Mm-hmm. We bring our best companies we can. We train our people. We send our our engineers to have master degrees in management. We train people to be program managers. So we train our own staff in the Panama Canal, and at the same time brought in the best companies we can. Parsons Brickenhoff from the U.S., eventually C.H. Tom Hill were our program managers, and so on. And we put together what sincerely I believe was a great program. And the canal then went to the world to explain and to get knowledge of what should be the size. We went to the Navy, for instance, to ask if they needed the canal to have this, to be able to handle a carrier. They say no, they don't have the need for that, and we should go in that direction. So we ended up with the dimensions that we have today. We have the issue of water, okay, because actually in the year 1997, 1998, that's when we had the toughest El Nino,
Mm-hmm. The El Nino weather pattern, which affected
rainfall, but that was happening that year. And then we also reduced the draft of the canal for the vessels.
Right.
In those days, that problem, that's why under the Constitution, the canal defines the watershed. So we went ahead and defined a larger watershed, much larger watershed, mm-hmm. than only the watershed that composed the two lakes that the canal has.
And let me ask you those two lakes, because it's sort of just an interesting engineering thing. Lake Gatun is man-made, so it's just a big hole dug in the ground by the original engineers between 1904 and 1914. Alajuela, is that man-made as well?
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, the Gatun for me is one of the real success stories of the U.S. when they were building the canal, mm-hmm. because the French wanted to use many set of locks. They started first trying to do a sea level canal. They were not successful, and then they tried to put many locks, along the Chagres River, and the Chagres was a very powerful river. Mm-hmm. So the the U.S., what they decided was to actually put a dam and dam the Chagres River and create this very large, at the time was the largest man-made lake in the world. Okay? And then in 1936, 37, when they were going to build the third set of locks, they needed more water, and they studied two options. One is Rio Indio, which Panama is now looking at, and the other one was the upper Alajuela, which is upper Chagres dam, lake.
So it's two man-made
Yeah.
dams with lakes behind them.
Exactly, and both of the the ones that create Gatun and Alajuela are in the Chagres River. So today, in order to actually basically have more water, Panama is going, the Panama Canal is moving to build the Rio Indio reservoir, which actually has been studied since the 1930s. Okay, now
By the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
well, in those days, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is helping the Panama Canal. It's being contracted by the Panama Canal Authority to help in putting together the program. There are going to be other companies for sure that are going to come in and also do a project because it's a very, it has to deal with, roads, infrastructure and so on to build the dam and then create a lake, which is about the same size as the Alajuela Lake. Okay? And it involves moving people from their land, reposition them. There's a lot of work that's been done over there over the years, and that is a very sensitive, things that we have to deal with. It's not like in the early
Right, there's community involvement, there's got to be.
There's a lot of that has to be taken care of.
Right.
Also, we are looking at, there's another lake that it's on the, I would say, east side of Panama, because the canal runs north-south.
Right, one of the hardest things when you look at Panama is it's an east-west oriented country, so north and south aren't all that
Yeah,
relevant.
exactly. That it's another lake that we have, and we are going to bring water to supply water to the city of Panama. So then, because most of the water that we use also is water that we drink, where the center of population of Panama is located around the canal. So it's been a challenge. It's something that happens from time to time. But I also have to remind, maybe if you were not in Panama, but on December of 2010, we had the reverse of El Nino. We had La Niña, and we have a 200-year event. Okay?
The flooding.
We have this rainstorm that actually closed the canal for 18 hours. Okay? It rained so much. We were very, very close, okay, that the water will go over, the locks. That was so that's how dramatic, Panama is very small. Okay, so you can get either these big storms, and sometimes you get this. So we need to bring more reliability in terms of water, to the use of the Panama Canal. In the new set of locks, the new canal, because it's like a new canal altogether. Actually, it's larger than the original canal in many ways. We also brought in a water-saving basins, which are the largest water-saving basins, I think, in the world today. Okay, which basically a much larger set of locks, okay, use 7% less water than the original locks. Okay?
Right.
Because every time we move a vessel in the Panama Canal, we use 55 million gallons of fresh water. And it's not, I would say it's not lost, because the canal in itself is a very large water management company. That's what we are. We reserve water. We transfer water from one lake to the other, and then eventually we use it to move the ships through the canal. At the same time, we also supply water for drinking.
It's the potable water source for most of Panama.
For most of the area of Panama and Colón. At the same time, we also generate energy with the water. So we do a lot of things with water. So Panama, that's why when I mentioned that we were working with the Tennessee Valley Authority, was because that actually is the heart of the canal, is the water. It's how we move water and use water. and we have the solution. The important thing is that we have the solution, okay? And in the meantime, today the canal is a very different canal. The original Panama Canal only allows you to have 39 feet of draft. That's it, okay? And also, and a ship that the maximum, let's say, in terms of containers, were 5,000 TEUs.
Mm-hmm.
The new
TEU being a standard 20-foot equivalent
container,
unit,
20-foot container.
which is the building block of international trade.
Exactly. The new canal provides 55 feet of water, okay? So it's much deeper. And at the same time, we are moving now a ship that has a record of about 17,650 containers. So it's over 3 times more of, so the use of water to move tonnage or containers is much more efficient. And it brought a huge benefit to the U.S. because once we start building the Panama Canal expansion, and we finished expansion in 2016, it opens a lot of opportunities to the U.S. East Coast of the Americas. Okay,
Actually, just a quick note. I remember going and visiting East Coast ports in Savannah, in New York, in Miami, and they literally moved bridges and had to put extensions on bridges. So these big super tankers, these sort of, skyscrapers going horizontally through the water, could fit under the bridges to get in. Yeah. But let me ask you something, Alberto.
And also, they were deepening, and they spent a lot of money.
Yeah, no, a lot of.
And I think there's something that is very interesting and also important to point out. When we were doing the studies of why and the size and so on of the canal, we did not contemplate it in those days that the energy was going to be an important trade of the Panama Canal. Because in the year we were putting this 2004, 2005, the U.S. was going to be a net importer of gas and oil. In fact, the ships were called the Q-Max, which was Qatar Max, okay, that was going to bring gas into the U.S. Fracking started, and everything changed, okay? And if the canal is not the size that we built it, okay, then none of those ships could have come through the Panama Canal.
Yeah, one of the high ironies of this is so when he said Qmax, right, that's the width and the depth of a ship as it displaces water going through the canals and through the locks in the canal. The Panamax was the standard for years. Yeah. And I've always reflected on the fact that when Torrijos and Carter signed the treaties, global shipping was in its infancy. Nobody conceived that we would be, making iPhones in Fujian province in China and selling them in Newark, New Jersey, and they'd go through the Panama Canal. It just wasn't like in their thought process. And yet, in Panama, as far back as when you took over the sovereign control of the canal, you were already beginning to think about a third set of locks because you realized that the width, the beam of the Panamax ship had already been sort of OBE'd in a sense by global shipping. So I heard you in this last...
And it's actually, it's all about, again, what I mentioned, about maximizing our biggest resource, that is the position that Panama has.
Right.
Okay?
Geography is destiny.
Geography is destiny, and geography is like real estate, position, position, position.
Yeah.
And that's why also, in Panama, we move a lot of containers to transshipment and so on, which is very important.
Okay, that brings me to something. You mentioned that as you went through the expansion of the canal and the development of the modern Panama Canal, I heard the Tennessee Valley Authority, I heard the U.S. Corps of Engineers. Did you consult with China?
No.
You didn't?
No, with China, no. We consulted with Chinese companies like POSCO, which is a shipping company, or Taiwanese companies, with every company in the world, shipping companies, because we needed to understand what was the size of vessels in those days.
Okay.
That people were thinking about using. For that purpose, yes, we were around the world and obviously talking to every major company that are clients of the Panama Canal in how they look at what they expect in the future and we have fantastic discussions.
But China as a country, China as a government was not involved in the Panama Canal or the Panamanian governments, various Panamanian governments, planning in terms of expanding the canal, making the canal more efficient.
No,
You
we
just-
didn't.
They were just customers.
Customer. We didn't even have relationship with China.
Okay. So then explain to us how it is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are 5 ports that are in the Panama Canal that work it. 3 on the Colon side, 2 on the Pacific side. Is that correct?
Yes, in the canal area, because as I call it the canal area, there are 5 ports. Okay, there's SSAA, which is U.S. Civil Service of America, was the first one. Okay, the first port that was developed over there.
And that's on the Caribbean
That's
side.
on the Caribbean side. Then there's the 2 that are managed by Hutchinson Whampoa, which is Cristobal and Balboa.
Okay.
There's-
And they're on either side, one on
There-
either side.
One in the Pacific, one in the Atlantic. Then there's one that is run by PSA, that is Singapore,
Okay.
which is on the Pacific side, on the West Bank. And then there's one that is operated by Evergreen, that is Taiwan company, a very large Taiwanese
Alberto, do
company.
any of these private companies, one in Singapore, one in Taiwan, one in the United States, 2 based in Hong Kong, do any of them own the land of the ports?
No, the owner is Panama. There are concessions for the operation of the ports. That was a process that Panama started when we started receiving the land and the ports, because the first things that that were reverted to Panama were the ports and the railroad, because there's also a railroad in Panama connecting all these ports.
And who operates that railroad?
It's operated by Kansas City Rail.
Kansas City Rail, okay.
And they actually upgraded the rail back in 98 or 99, and then it's been operational since then. That's a group of ports. There are more ports we put together, we plan, and I think that Panama needs to expand ports even further. We had, but when we were putting the expansion program, we also designed ports on the Pacific and Atlantic side. We wanted, and I think that Panama eventually is going to move forward in building what we call a mega port that is on the west side of the entrance of the canal.
That would be on the Pacific side.
On the Pacific side, outside. And it's important because we need to receive those ships that actually cannot go through the Panama Canal.
Because they're too big.
They are too big. Ships are over 20,000 TEUs, okay? That's a 20-foot container measure. Those ships needs to go to Panama because Panama is a major transshipment. It's the largest transshipment hub of the Americas.
Right.
Okay, we're moving 9.3 million TEUs just so that we can have a relationship. That's the same amount of containers that are moved in the port of New York, New Jersey.
Right.
Okay.
And just so people have it in non-engineering terms, think of it as the TEU is the Lego block of
Exactly.
international commerce. Your TV, your iPhone, your washer, dryer, everything that isn't rolled on or rolled off goes in a TEU. Produce goes in a refrigerated TEU. These Lego blocks come into ports all over the world, and what the ports do is they literally take them on, take them off, they open them up. Half of this Lego block is going to go to Chile and Argentina, and it gets put on a smaller ship. All that happens in the ports and the logistics centers that are in the Panama Canal and around the world, in point of fact, in any port.
Yep.
And that's what ports do. But let me come back. You mentioned that, so there's 5 ports in the canal, SSA Marine, which I think is based out of Washington State.
Yeah.
They were the first concessionaire, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then how did Hutchinson Whampoa get their contracts?
There was a an offer by Bechtel for the port of
Bechtel, the American,
American
engineering company.
engineering company for the ports of Balboa, Cristobal, and the rail.
Okay.
That was kind of a package. And the offer was too low. The government thought that it was too low, and then they opened a bid only for the port of Cristobal and the port of Balboa and took out the rail.
Ah.
And the reason for taking out the rail is because the rail not only serves those two ports, it also serves the other ports. Okay, so Panama decided that they would change that, take the rail out. And that bid was won by Hutchinson Whampoa, which at the time was and it still is a Hong Kong base.
Right.
Okay, this is 1996 when this is happening. So they haven't.
Who supervised that bidding process?
That's it's a maritime authority. That's the entity of Panama that runs all the maritime
Right.
ports and the flag.
Was the Federal Maritime Commission of the United States, were they briefed on this at the time?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Okay. No, it's not. Sorry, that sounded like, sort of like the Attorney General. What did you know and how much did you know at what time? No, because I don't have that part clear. But what I remember, and, there's a reason I'm asking it, what I remember was Senator Jesse Helms was very upset when Hutchinson Whampoa won that contract.
There was a lot of.
Did you get called up to testify for that?
I got called to testify in 1999. I went to the Senate. I was a witness for the U.S.
For the U.S. government?
government, yes.
Okay.
I was working for the U.S. government as the
Oh, before the handover?
Yeah, this is 1999. We were asked to go to the Congress, to the Senate, sorry, to testify on the issue that they were saying that the Chinese were running the Panama Canal, and the Panama Canal was under the Department of Defense. Okay, it was a part of the Army, and so we were there with the four-star general from Southcom to explain that that was not the case, and never been the case actually, because the two ports were actually operated by Hutchinson Whampoa. That was a Hong Kong-based company. So, and that story started, this rumor in those days. So we were asked, and we went there, and we explained. Okay, so that happened back then, and the reason was most surely because they, there were those two companies at the time, when still are, operating the ports.
Right. One company, two ports. It's the same company, right?
The same
yeah.
company that operates. In fact, they have developed very well the port of Balboa and not so the port of Cristobal.
Why is that?
Because I think, I am not sure, but I can think that they have not done that because Hutchinson Whampoa has a major transshipment hub in Freeport, Bahamas. Okay. And therefore, the Caribbean side has not been developed as much as the Pacific side.
And Hutchinson Whampoa, just sort of interesting, I did not know this until recently, operates ports in 129 countries around the world. They operate ports in the United States. They actually own and operate the largest port in Great Britain, in Felixstowe, in Suffolk. It's the largest container port. But let's go back for a second to what you mentioned about the fracking industry. Again, one of these things that, when the canal was handed over and you got the keys to it in 1999, the United States wasn't fracking, and it was a net importer of energy. When you were looking at the expansion in the early 2000s, did you conceive that the vast majority of Midwestern American fracked natural gas, liquid natural gas and liquid propane gas would be moved through the canal?
No.
Was that, you
Actually,
just,
no.
that wasn't on the radar?
No, it was not in the radar because it didn't exist. And we are talking about 2004, 2005. Remember, we started the project of the Panama Canal expansion in the year 2007. Okay, so fracking was not.
Wasn't even a part of it.
No, it was even part of it. The only gas that we thought that was going to move through the Panama Canal in our projection was gas that was coming from Trinidad and Tobago.
Ah, okay.
Going,
TNT.
yeah, going into Chile. So there were few gas products going through the canal. When this movement of LNG and LPG through the Panama Canal has accelerated the use of the Panama Canal expansion.
Mm-hmm.
We are now, I would say that the canal, the year before the problem that we have with the weather, we were moving about 530 million tons, which is actually twice as much as what we were moving before. Or the canal, the maximum we moved was about 300 million, which was getting almost to capacity before
Before the expansion. Yeah.
And the expansion is projected to go to about 620, 640 million. So we were almost at 80% capacity just 3 years after opening.
After opening. Can you tell me, where does that American fracked gas go?
Well, it goes to Asia. A lot of that to Japan, Korea, China. You know, they are,
The consumers of American
consumer of
energy.
American energy, and also we consume American energy in Panama.
Yeah.
We have almost 800 mega facility by AES.
If they didn't have the expanded third set of locks, which you guys paid for that, right?
Totally.
I mean, meaning Panama paid
Yeah.
for that. You went to capital markets, you raised the money.
Yeah, we got
about 5.8 billion.
Yeah, we have a loan with 5 multilaterals to do it.
Okay.
About close to 2.5 billion. The rest was put out by the Panama Canal. And yes, we built it. And
Okay. So if that had not been built, how would American fracked gas get to, the consumers in Asia?
it will have to go around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa.
In Africa. Okay, going the other way.
The other way.
Yeah. Yeah, which obviously would add a lot of cost to
A lot of cost and
right,
time.
Right. And just a, sort of a point, the issue of cost, when you look at the three major ways, four really, that global commerce is moved, right? You have maritime, you have aviation, you have railroad, and then you have truck, right? Vehicles. And so when you see on the highway a trailer truck, that trailer literally has been picked up off of a ship, loaded from a crane, hooked onto the truck, just, like your nephew or your son's Legos, and goes in. That's the most expensive form of transport. So that's why shippers always want to keep their merchandise on a ship until the last tactical mile before the PlayStation 2 hits Walmart. And that's why the Panama Canal is such a great deal for world commerce.
Let me just tell you a story on that one, now that you mentioned. When we were looking at, when we were actually in the process of the transfer of the Panama Canal, the canal was not being used by container ships. And I asked why. I went around the world and started asking why. And we realized, and Joe was, again, my chairman of the board. Actually, the Republic of Texas was in charge of the canal at the time, Joe? University of Texas and Texas A&M, okay?
My condolences to both of you.
But in those days, the canal was not reliable in the sense that if you come, a container vessel needs an on-time service, and the canal was not providing that. Okay?
Why was that?
Because the canal in those days were not competing. Basically, you come in, first go out, and that's it. Doesn't matter if the ships were all the same, for the Panama Canal Authority Commission. So I went out and started asking why we are not getting more container ships through the Panama Canal, because most of the Northeast Asia movement went through the intermodal system of the United States. You know, they
Intermodal being you
being
roll it off
ro-
a ship, it
ship,
gets on a train.
a train, then goes into
Okay.
then it goes into a truck, and eventually goes the last mile into the Walmart. Okay. So we start putting together a reservation system, allowing to reserve up to a year. Okay, and then we will guarantee that ships with a reservation will go through the Panama Canal in 18 hours or less once they arrive to canal waters.
And do they have to get there like an airplane at an airport at a particular time
Yeah,
in a
they
particular window?
if they were coming to New York, they have to be on time because that's the slot. So it runs like that. And then we start getting cargo from, or services put through the Panama Canal to the East Coast. And I went to visit my friend Lillian Barone from the New Jersey Port Authority. And she said to me, Alberto, let's put together what we're going to call the all-water route, because we are competing, with the East Coast ports. We want to bring that cargo through in a much faster, a much efficient and cost-efficient way. And that is actually the all-water route through the Panama Canal is much more efficient in cost than actually moving through different models of transportation.
Sure.
So we start doing that, and then we agree. We have a lot of MOUs, and the Panama Canal still have a lot of MOUs with all of the East Coast ports and Gulf ports of the U.S. The biggest one is Houston. Houston is our biggest, the one that uses most of the Panama now that they are also moving gas out of Houston and Louisiana, and that coalition, okay, it's one that actually promotes that the canal is used to move the cargo because you are moving 15 or 16,000 containers at a time.
Right.
Okay, and so we became a very important, and I think that's what the canal is all about, is one more system of transportation, of moving goods, in an efficient way.
Right, in the most cost-effective manner.
Yeah, and
so let's talk about
so
cost
when we
for a minute.
expanded, obviously, that was very, very, very unique because we tripled the capacity of the ships.
Right, right. Let's talk about cost for a minute. How is a shipper, how is a ship, okay? And we know that there really are very few U.S. flagged commercial ships. Mm-hmm. There's a very small merchant marine, but most ships are flagged. They're built and owned by Taiwan, by Greece, by Denmark, by China, and they go through the canal. They pay a fee. They pay a toll. How does the Panama Canal establish that toll structure?
The same way that we did when we were under the U.S. Same way. We haven't changed that. And actually, it's part of the neutrality treaty. The canal decides that if we want to modify the tolls, we do a study of why we're doing that, or what are the needs, and so on, our cost of operation, et cetera. And also then we decide to set a new set of tolls, and we usually do it for a period of about 3 to 5 years. And then we send a notice to the world, basically, mm-hmm. saying this is what we are intent to do. And then we open a process, okay, in which the companies, nations also, countries, okay, for instance, Ecuador, every time that we raise the tolls and they think that we're going to affect them in moving their bananas, to Europe, they come and claim, and Japan, same thing. The U.S.
Nobody likes rising prices.
Nobody likes rising prices. That's everyone would say.
When the New Jersey Turnpike raises the toll, I don't like it.
Okay, nobody likes it, and we understand that is part of this. But the process is very open, and there's a huge discussion. And then we do a open discussion. People come, and they will present their case publicly. Okay, we take all of that into account. And then we go back and revise what we can change or not. If we decide to change what we propose, then we have another
Consultation.
consultation process. Until then, we decide that is going to be done. Then the canal approve that, okay, and then it has to go to the cabinet of Panama for the ratification of that adjustment.
Okay. So the work, the technical work is done by the Panama Canal Authority, but the validation of the price increases is ratified by the Assembly of Panama.
No, by the cabinet.
By the cabinet.
By the
Okay,
cabinet, yes.
got it. And what is it based on? Is it based on the size of the ship? Is it based on the amount of cargo? Is it based on the number of TEUs? How do you determine it?
It depends on the different type of vessels. They are not the same. The containers are charged per TEU, which is basically usually about the capacity of the ship.
Okay.
Is by, well, we already know the Lego block, as you were mentioning, okay, per Lego block, and if they are full or they are not, or they are empty, because sometimes they are coming empty or partially empty. So all of that is taken into consideration and is part of the tolls. When you go to a grain
Bulk.
the bulk carry is by volume, the capacity of the vessel to carry that volume. If it's by the passenger ships, it's usually by the berth of how many passengers you can have or berth you have. Doesn't mean you can have more or less passengers. If it's by Navy vessels, for instance, it's by displacement, okay, and being the same,
Gross tonnage.
of displacement, and so on. So every segment has its own way, but usually it's based on the carrying capacity of the ship.
Got it. Was for naval vessels, and in particular U.S. naval vessels, were those prices raised during the current water crisis?
No, we charge by displacement. Okay,
Got it.
It's the same.
There was no increase for the U.S. Navy because of the lack of transits, because they get front-of-the-line privilege, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. Navy does not have to bid a year out to get its spot.
No, the Navy vessels as well as the Panamanian vessels, they pay the way that is measured the ship is by displacement, and they pay the tolls moving through the canal. They do get first in line. Okay, they are quick and expeditiously move through the Panama Canal.
Okay.
Okay, and usually, as you know, they are sometimes using other vessels that are support vessels. They have to declare that ship, for instance, that it could be a container ship.
Okay.
It's being used by the Navy, and therefore that ship also get the same treatment. Okay.
Got it. I am getting furious eyebrows and now finger motions from my boss, Ben Gadan here. Alberto, and I think it's fair to say that you and I could spend all day talking about it. I want to just finish with one comment and one shout out. I was and I remain a huge Panama Canal geek. As an old military pilot, I was fascinated by the technology. I flew something that was built almost around the time that the canal was built. But what really sort of stays with me always is my favorite jacket. There's a jacket that was given to me by Panama Canal pilots. And I think you probably know him, Mr. Galvan. Diogenes Galvan is a Panama Canal pilot. He is an Afro-Panamanian, and he began as a small boy selling cookies to the American soldiers and sailors outside of Cocosolo, where today the SSA terminal sits. And he told me one time that he would go, his mother would make these cookies, he would go sell them, he'd make a few pennies and go home with it, that he always thought that if he could get a job with the canal, he could have the American dream without having to emigrate to the United States. He gave me that jacket, and I always remember what it means for him. The Panama Canal is for, and I can't speak as a Panamanian, but I can relay what they've told me. It is the essence of Panama. If you go back, it's actually the reason why in another era of American expansionism, it was carved off from Colombia. But I think it's absolutely certain to say that it has been a tremendous success story, and much of that success was due to the gentleman here to my left. Alberto, it has been a great pleasure to have you in D.C. Thank you for this masterclass on the Panama Canal.
Thank you. Just to finish, it's actually not about me. It's about a lot of people. Okay? There's a lot of people that actually makes it happen. As you were mentioned, yes, the canal is in every Panamanian blood, and it's been an effort of many people that makes this happen and actually makes the canal operate the way it operates today, for the benefits of obviously my country and for the benefits of the world.
Well, thank you for your leadership in that effort. And that's it.